that Cuba is ready to fall. You know,
Yes.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
As the US seizes tankers and looks for ways to control Venezuelan oil, Mexico is emerging as a key fuel supplier to Cuba. It's become an important lifeline as the Caribbean island battles an energy crisis.
Aquí ya me encuentro en la calle.
After several attempts, Helene walked out from her native Cuba, an island marked by rolling blackouts. Now in Mexico, the memory of those long nights stays with her.
Siempre han existido los apagones en Cuba, pero
She explains that blackouts have always been part of life in Cuba, but says that since 2019, they started to last entire days, and when the pandemic hit, things got even worse. The crisis didn't just turn off the lights, it closed doors. With the U.S. capture of Nicolas Maduro, Venezuelan oil aid to Cuba was cut off, making Mexico's help with fuel to the island essential. In 2025, Mexico sent more than 12,000 barrels a day to Cuba, nearly half of the island's crude consumption.
I think it's just going to fall. I don't think we need any action. It looks like it's going down. It's going down for the count.
President Claudia Sheinbaum defending Mexico's oil shipments,
No se está enviando más petróleo del que se había enviado.
saying that for years, oil has been sent to Cuba under contracts and as humanitarian aid. The impact isn't just diplomatic. Energy analysts said these shipments are valuable and could affect Mexico's own dwindling domestic supply.
El año pasado,
Jaime Brito estimated that last year, about 15 ships were sent to Cuba between May and June, adding that this amounts to roughly 10 million barrels of crude, worth close to $800 million. Still, experts in the region see a huge risk for Mexico in its current Cuba policy.
el apoyo mexicano a Cuba.
Ricardo Pascoe said Mexico's oil support for Cuba is worth billions and directly clashes with Washington's push for influence in Latin America.
realmente salir de Cuba.
And yet, Healing points to what she calls a contradiction. Even with the steady supply of Mexican oil to Cuban shores, the energy crisis hasn't let up. She argues that Mexico's help ends up favoring the regime, not the people. As the flow of oil continues, so does the pressure, as energy becomes a new frontline in the region's power struggle.
talk a bit about these points. Of course, there was a lot said at this particular meeting. And Trump, of course, as I mentioned just then, said America will decide which oil companies can go into Venezuela to extract oil. Do you see there being a bit of a global pushback here on his big move?
Good afternoon. There is already substantial international and industry pushback against this model, which many see as open neo-colonial and neo-imperial. So after the US kidnapped Nicolas Maduro in that cross-border operation that clearly violates international law and the UN Charter, Trump announced that Washington would control oil sales indefinitely and decide which corporations extract it, which goes far beyond any plausible self-defense or humanitarian justification. So we need to remember that for Venezuela, this comes on top of years of unilateral coercive measures. For example, oil sanctions since 2017 have cost the country tens of billions of dollars in lost revenue and foreign exchange. So at the same time, major oil companies are signaling their own kind of pushback. Executives from firms like ExxonMobil describe Venezuela as uninvestable under current conditions, despite Trump's promise of total safety. And experts stress that restoring production from under 1 million barrels a day to earlier levels, which would be approximately 3 million, would require years and tens of billions in investment that no one wants to risk under a foreign-run, legally contested framework. So globally, resistance is legal, political, and economic. Many actors see this not as benign reconstruction effort, but as an experiment in 21st century imperial resource.
So it does seem that, I guess, Donald Trump's simplicity of the plan doesn't seem quite, as much as he's talking about it being quite simplistic. I want to also talk about him claiming that the US has earned Venezuela's respect following this operation to seize their president. Of course, we're seeing these multiple protests even within Venezuela all around the globe. Do you really think that this is the majority consensus from those at home in Venezuela?
No. Trump's narrative bears little resemblance to the fragmented reality inside the country. So I'm talking about Venezuela. The operation was in legal terms a kidnapping, as I said before, but on the ground reactions have been mixed and deeply ambivalent inside and outside Venezuela. So some Venezuelans who suffer under Maduro's rule express relief and even gratitude in the first hours. But thousands of Maduro supporters immediately denounced the act as kidnapping and marched demanding his release. And even many opponents are uneasy about a scenario where a foreign power both removes their head of state and assumes long-term control over the main source of income.
And what about within the US as well, and Venezuelans who are within that nation?
Yes, among US citizens, opinion is sharply divided, and overall support for the strike and the broader project is weak. Polling shows only roughly about a third of respondents approve of the military action in Venezuela, with a similar share opposed and a clear majority worried the US will get too deeply involved. And another survey I checked finds most respondents still oppose a full-scale invasion, even if support has risen somewhat, especially among Republican voters.
I want to also talk about other countries and their responses here. And one of the mentions of Trump today that was quite significant was Trump and Colombia's president. They're set to now arrange a White House meeting after threats of military action. There was claims here that Gustavo Petro called Trump to explain the situation of drugs and other disagreements. How do you think this relationship is now faring, and I guess what would be Petro's aim here?
I think that the relationship is still very volatile. It was worse, but as you mentioned before, yes, just a few days ago, they were talking by phone. So I think the relationship is fundamentally shaped by asymmetry and the new imperial context in the region. And this is about the new national security strategy. So Petro's aims are defensive and strategic. I would say 3 points. I would say deterrence and de-escalation, narrative struggle, and a regional principle. So Petro is trying to mobilize Colombian society around sovereignty and then engaging Trump directly. And he got that call the other day. He's trying to raise the political cost in Washington of threatening Colombia as this next Venezuelan scenario. And also this narrative struggle. He wants to counter the portrayal of Colombia as narco state run personally by him, because that was the accusation that Trump was talking about. And also about the regional principle, which is very important. Petro has framed the Venezuela operation as a war over oil and coal and an assault on Latin American sovereignty. So he will likely use the White House visit to argue against normalizing a doctrine where the US kidnaps one president and then seize control of the natural resources of that country.
All right, it's such a fast-moving situation. We appreciate your time here on Newsnight 1.
Thank you very much.